Hello, and welcome to another episode of Bippity Boppity Business. Today, I am super excited to do an episode that's a little different from ones we've done in the past. It is no secret that Disney is known for delivering amazing customer experiences and creating customer experiences that create guests that want to go for life and experiences that people never forget. And I think as I go into this season of better understanding how to create amazing customer experiences for businesses in the B2B and online tech SaaS world, it surprises me how few magical moments, quote unquote, if you will, businesses take to implement in their customer journey and experience process. So I'm very excited to bring on a special guest today who is going to discuss all things customer experience from his lens and just really bring us into this understanding of how to apply some of these concepts that Disney teaches for our business. And Doug is a top 25 influencer and thought leader in business and IT. And he's going to share so many ways for us to improve our customer experience by aligning them with IT and the business objectives. And a fun fact is that he also and his wife happen to be big Disney enthusiasts as well. So, everyone, we're going to give a virtual round of applause for Doug. Doug, thank you so much for joining me today on Bippity Boppity Business. How are you?
Happy to be here, Rita. Thanks for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure. When you reached out to me on LinkedIn and told me how you were interested in being on the show and you were also a Disney fan, I felt like we immediately connected. And we have a shared affinity for Star Wars as well. And you told me that one of your dogs has the name Bippity Boppity. What's going on with that?
Well, no, my wife actually raises bottle baby kittens
Oh, your
for
cats. Yes.
for a rescue, and one of she always names the batches of kittens that she's fostering and bottle feeding after different groups of Disney characters, and one
Yes.
of the batches happened to be Bippity Boppity and Boo, and so when I saw the name of your show, I was like, I gotta appear on Rita's show.
And I was so thankful for that because you are truly an expert in teaching these concepts as someone who is also experienced, not just on the consultant end, but being an IT professional as well. So I'm going to let you take it away and provide your presentation to us, and we'll kind of go along together. So here we go.
Great. So I'm going to sort of preface this by saying that to Rita's point, I've been a lifelong Disney fan, and those of you who are familiar with Disney World know that it opened in October of 1971. I went for the first time in February of 1972 and have been back just about every year since. I don't live in the Orlando area. I grew up in Pennsylvania, then I went to University of Illinois, and then I've been in Texas for the last 27 years. So never lived in Florida, but I've made it a point to, sort of geek out. And, when my friends were going to Daytona Beach for spring break, I'd be the one who'd be like, drop me off in Orlando, I'm going to Disney. So lifelong fan, and really the Disney experience has shaped a lot of my career. IT is actually a second career for me. My first career was in sales and sales management, but I've always been a solution solver, a problem solver. When it came to sales, and even when it came to IT, I wasn't the one who was pitching the flavor of the day or trying to push the best technology solution. To me, it's always how do we solve a problem? People buy things and do things for two reasons. Either they want to avoid some pain that they're experiencing in their life, or they want to avoid or approach some pleasure that they want to achieve in the future, and sort of that nirvana state or that Disney state, if you will. So That's sort of the background behind me. And Rita, I'll let you, if you want to advance to
Yeah,
the
absolutely. I
slides
just
now.
wanted
I can.
I wanted to point out too that the fact that you don't live in Florida and that's how much of a Disney fan you are to want to keep going and flying here. And, that's really what we're trying to get at is like, yes, we're Disney fans, but there is some business foundational elements to the Disney experience that have so much value because if your business is one where people fly from all over the world or want to call in and work with you from all over the world and interact with, then that means you're doing something really special. So, absolutely. Yes, tell us more about yourself professionally and kind of what led you to what you're doing now.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I had a first career in sales and sales management. I got to the age that is probably um, double what your typical audience is. I got to my early 40s and finally said, I'm tired of chasing the horizon. Sales
Yes.
is just a grind. It really is. And so you can be very successful in sales, make a lot of money, but every year it just gets harder and harder because they make the goals that much harder. So I in my early 40s, I finally decided I don't want to keep doing this. It's burning me out. It's not fulfilling any longer. Financially, it was, but I guess from the perspective of the way that I felt at the end of the day, it wasn't. And what I was doing for my family, it wasn't. So I gave up that. Started off in IT, but absolutely at the ground level.
Mm.
I didn't have any formal IT training. My sales career was not in IT. It was in financial services for the most part, and in transportation. So I really started off at the bottom level in IT, and started off as a level one service desk analyst working overnight. So when you call for tech support, that was me in the middle of the night taking that call. Um, and I did that for a couple of years, but the whole idea was that I really wanted to grow into a higher career in technology. But I'm not a very technical person. But I was fortunate in the timing of making that career change that IT was transitioning from being all about the technology into being about the experience you deliver. And so that the timing was just absolutely perfect. I affiliated myself with HDI. I'm currently the national chairman of their local chapter network. And for those of you in the Central Florida area, there is a Central Florida chapter. So if you're interested in IT service management, want to learn more, Jim Ryav in Winter Park can help you out. But I affiliated myself with HDI and IT service management just so I wouldn't, in my new career, make the same mistakes that somebody had already made. Learned a lot about the business, went through a lot of certifications, and I'm not going to go through this line by line with you. You can read it yourself. But really, what I did is I just didn't want to try to reinvent the wheel in a new career. People were doing, the best practices were already there when it came to IT service management and IT operations. And so it was just a matter of me understanding what those were, but then sort of putting my own philosophy and spin on them. And that's really where the Disney experience came in. And so, when I look at it, we all sort of choose our own path. And I just love the Skyliner, so that's why I chose this one. For those of you who have been to Disney World and have ridden the Skyliner, this was actually taken in one of the stations. And I actually went through and snapped the posters. They look like movie posters inside the Skyliner stations. But we all choose our own path, and so there's no right way to go about a career, whether it's in IT or anything else. There's no right way, no wrong way. If somebody would have asked me, when I was 15 years old or 25 years old or whatever, Doug, what do you want to be when you grow up? I guarantee you the last thing on my mind would have been a customer experience expert or an IT technologist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, we all choose our own path, and it may be a winding path. It may not be straight, kind of like the Skyliner doesn't go straight from point A to point B. There's all those little roundhouses, and you stop at different resorts. So we all choose our own path, and it's going to vary through time. What we do have to do, though, is choose which path we want to take. There's an easy path, and that's the path of least resistance. And so when I think of that, obviously the dark side was the easy path. It's, give in to give into the dark side. And so it's very easy to just do what you're naturally good at, or just sort of fall into something and just pursue it to the end. But you know, as I mentioned, when I transitioned from sales out of sales, I did it because it was no longer fulfilling. Yes, it was easy, and yes, I was making really good money. I went from making six figures, and this was 25 years ago. I went from making six figures to making $32,000 the next year.
Wow.
Yeah, so it would have been easy just to keep collecting that check, that six-figure check every year after year after year. But eventually it just, it would have been the burnout. And, I think of it in terms of I wouldn't have been fulfilled. I wouldn't have felt good. I probably, honestly, it probably would have cost me my marriage and, and the relationship with my children.
You would have
Uh,
become like Darth Vader, sold
yeah,
everything off to the dark side of typical business process of not
ab-
done something that you're actually good at and what you're
yeah.
fulfilled with.
Absolutely. So the easy path may not be the best path. And so if you want to advance to the next slide there, you can also choose the difficult path. And I call it the difficult path because sometimes you need to make some really tough choices. Sometimes you need to give up a six-figure career in order to earn $32,000 the next year. And it may take you, the better part of a decade to get back to that income level. But you can do it because it's something that you embrace and enjoy, and it's something that you find fulfilling. And really, there's not a day goes by now when, when I don't just feel great about what I accomplished in that given day. And whether it's helping an individual, whether it's helping a company, or whether it's helping, you know, helping a business, or an industry as a whole. So really, the ultimate point is you just got to accept your own choices, and you got to understand that there's repercussions to them. It could be loss of income. It could be loss of family. It could be, whether you feel fulfilled or not. But you got to accept your own choices. You just got to make them at some point. And Rush, and I don't. There's probably not a whole lot of Rush fans anymore, but Rush has a song lyric that I absolutely love, and that is from the song "Free Will." If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. So had I not made that career decision at 42 years of age, I still had made a choice, and it probably wouldn't have been for the better.
I think it's so profound that you had that whole IT career and business career and in sales and all of that, like up until, that age at 42, where most people settle into their career and then feel like their choices are so permanent, but they're not. Like, you chose that path, you leaned into the things that resonated with you in order to really make an impact in the industry. And I think there's so many business leaders listening to what you just said, feeling maybe they're not able to make a shift, whether it's personal to their own growth or change in a process or a system or way things are done within the business, because they feel so just solid. But the beauty is that you do always have that choice, and acknowledging and recognizing that choice, that you have it, and then realizing and writing out what those true paths are, whatever it may be, is so profound and amazing, because that's the first step to a journey, and whether it's a journey for yourself or even for a customer too.
Absolutely. So once you've made your choice, and we talked about the easy path and the difficult path,
Yes.
I always choose to partner with the right type of people. And so to me, if you want to advance to the next slide, the first thing I look for is people who help me hear the magic.
Mhm.
When you know there's the magic is calling, right? And so when it comes to the magic is calling, you just have to be able to hear it, right? You need to be able to lean in, to your point, and this picture actually shows us leaning in to hear the magic,
I
right? That's
love
my
this
wife.
picture.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's my wife, Amy, and we're leaning in to hear the magic. And the point is that I needed to find somebody who supported this calling that I felt I had. And, it would have been easy for my wife to say, you're nuts. You're earning six figures and you want to give it up to earn one third of that next year. It would have been easy for her to say that. The tough choice for her, the difficult path for her was saying, hey, if you really feel that's what you need to do, then go ahead and do it. We'll figure out a way, right? So find the people that help you do that, and then help you or find the people who help you see the magic. So it's one thing to actually have this calling and feel like you need to pursue it. It's an absolutely other thing to visualize it and see what it looks like, because I didn't give up six figures in sales to earn $32,000. That's not the path I was on. The path was to find something that I found capitalized on my strengths and built something bigger than me, bigger than where we were. And I perceived that the technology and IT operations industry was going in this experiential way. That was really the wave of the future, and I wanted to be in front of that wave, because I knew what my approach to sales had been, and I knew that, harkening back to all my Disney experiences and why I love Disney, that I could use those things in this path forward. And so, my wife helped me see that path and see the magic.
Tell me a little bit about the experiential aspect of IT that you were able to recognize, just from like Disney, that you see being more implemented and going forward within that industry in the future.
Yeah, it's what's really cool about what's happening in IT these days, and anybody who goes on LinkedIn sees, probably sees customer experience in their feed over and over and over again, and probably doesn't really understand what the difference is between customer service and customer experience. I actually give a conference presentation on this very topic. What, customer service versus customer experience, what's the difference? And I actually use examples of businesses that people can relate to. And this is geared toward IT technologists and IT operations folks. But I use examples that help them understand the differentiation between the two. And the two examples that I fall back on are, when you go to Six Flags, which I live 3 exits away from a Six Flags park in San Antonio, Texas, and
That's
I go
awesome.
there maybe once a year. Seriously, I've had a season pass for 8 years. I go maybe once a year. For my $8 a month, I go once a year. Um, in contrast, I go to Disney World probably 3-4 times a year on average, and we're not talking about the same $8 a month to go to Disney World, right? We're talking
Right.
hundreds and thousands of dollars. But the reason why I make that choice and why I spend my money that way is because I go away with a different feeling. And so the sort of stereotype of help desk support, and that's what it was known as for years, was help desk support, is the no help desk support. I mean, that's the, that's what it was always jokingly referred to. Yeah, call 1-800 no help.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what began to happen is, that there were what we affectionately in the industry call watermelon metrics. So people think that customer satisfaction scores are the end all be all of, that tells us how the customer really feels, right? And so, IT drove these CSAT surveys and just, tried to maximize the performance on those CSAT surveys. What is your customer satisfaction score? 95%. Well, what you find is that that's not what the word on the street is. That's not how people really feel. That's not the sentiment behind the way that they feel about their IT interaction. I actually do an exercise in one of my presentations at conferences, and I ask everybody in the room, everybody in the room who your company has a 95%, or no, I'm sorry, I start with 80%. 80% CSAT score, raise your hand. Every hand in the room goes up, right? Then I say, all right, 90%. And maybe a couple of hands drop, but most
Yeah.
of them are still up in the air. Then I say 92%, still most of the hands are in the air. 95, and still probably half the hands are in the air. And then I say, those of you who really believe that that's how your customer feels, keep your hand in the air. And just about every hand drops. So even we don't believe our own metrics, right? So what I'm trying to achieve is a way of delivering that experience so that people don't go. I mean, nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, "Hey, I want to call the service desk because I've got an IT problem." Nobody does that, right? But what I don't want them to do is wake up and go, "Oh God, I got to call the service desk because I've got an IT problem." I want them to go, "Hey, I know I've got an IT problem. I can't fix it myself, but at least I know when I call the 800 number, they're going to take care of me, and it's going to be fast, and it's going to be painless, and it's going to be fixed the first time." That's what they want. That's the experience, right? And so that's what we're trying to deliver. I lost your audio. Can you? Now I can hear you, Rita.
Yes. So, what's a common no help desk experience that IT is unknowingly delivering to their customers that you actually, often see and kind of go like, "Hey, you guys do that. Like, let's actually do this instead."
Yep, great one. So here's the thing: when you call the 1-800 number for support, what they're tasked with doing is getting you back in business as quickly as possible. That's it. First time fix. That's what they're there to do. But first time fix to that service desk agent means something different than it does to you as a service consumer. To them, it's you couldn't do X. I'm going to make sure that right now you can do X. You can take care of what you needed to do. To you, it's I don't want to have to ever call back about X again, right? And
Right.
so every time X recurs and you have to call back, you get progressively more upset and progressively less satisfied with the level of service you've received. And yet the agent has done exactly what they're tasked with doing. And so this is where the dichotomy between sentiment and scores comes from, because every time you have to call that in, you give one star less on your CSAT survey, right? And by the end, by the fourth or fifth time, you're just putting everybody on blast. I mean, it's a 1 star, even though the agent did exactly what they were supposed to do. They got a 1 star, which is why the CSAT is probably not the best measure of the way that you feel about your service desk interactions, because what you really want is to find out how you feel about the overall IT engagement, not just that. So it's not the agent who did anything wrong, it's the IT experience that went wrong.
Mm. How is something like that remedied? Like it's written right into the process for an IT agent to be, reconfirming all this information and then passing you off to another person and then passing off to another person and then you reconfirm all the information. And it's like, at what point have we like just lost that customer and what companies have remedied that and just do it right?
Yeah, so there's an uneasy fix, the difficult path and the easy path, right? There's an
Right.
easy path fix, and that is you just throw more bodies at it. Just throw more agents, or you change your CSAT scores, or whatever you want to do. Those are the easy pathways. That's the dark side approach, right? Um, but looking at it from the Jedi perspective, the way you do it in Jedi fashion is you find out what's causing issue X to recur. You put in place, and it's in ITIL terminology, it's called problem management. You look for these recurring issues and you fix what the root cause is. Instead of just throwing bodies at the front end, you throw bodies at the back end. And the reason this doesn't occur in most organizations is because those back end bodies are a lot more expensive. It's a lot easier to throw a couple more agents on the phone at 1/3 the salary of putting one person on the back end to do the analysis and then fix the root cause stuff. So it's the organizations that play the long game. And part of my career has been in the BPO industry, which is managed services, third party, outsource, if you will. And one of the things that I'm always challenged by is when customers say, I absolutely want premier exceptional service. And oh, by the way, I don't want to pay much for it.
Exactly. It's like you get what you pay for. How do you
Right,
balance that from a
right.
business and
So
customer level?
yeah, so I did some time in project management, IT project management, and there's what's called the triple constraint: time, cost, and scope. And so those three things, if any one of those changes, and we like to think of it in terms of you can have it good, fast, or cheap. What do you want? You can pick two: good, fast, or cheap. I can give it to you good and fast, but it won't be cheap. I can give it to you fast and good, but it won't be, or fast and good, but it won't be. Anyway, you get where I'm going, right?
I
Good,
feel
fast, and
you.
cheap. Good, fast, and cheap. So you can pick two. You can't have all three. And so when it comes down to those conversations, you need to just be able to say, guess what? And this is where the Disney tie-in comes, right? And this is like how I hook people. There's a reason I only go to Six Flags once a year, and it costs me $8 a month, and I've been paying it for 8 years. It's because I'd rather go to Disney and spend a lot more, because what I come away with isn't cheap, but it is good. And it may not even be fast, but you know what? The good is so much better that I don't I could care less about the good. I mean, the fast and the cheap. I'd rather just go away with that exceptional feeling. And so when you start putting it in those terms, people start to, the lights start to come on. And it comes on in IT, but it also comes on from the business perspective, because they do the same thing. Trust me. They're, when you talk to somebody in business, and you can couch things in the language that they understand, suddenly the light goes on. They understand that IT gets it now. And so that there's a that's you asked about companies that get it. Obviously, you know, this this group gets it, right?
The mouse gets it. And I think it's
Yeah.
something that maybe somebody would be like, okay, why is this even a big deal? It's a big deal because IT is one of the last departments that a business thinks, how do we create a positive customer experience here? You spent a lot of time through the sales process, had an amazing sales journey. You spent a lot of time, being delivering the service itself. But when something breaks or something goes wrong, why are we not continually providing that same level in the support end as well? And it's so funny because that's the point at which people will most likely decide whether or not they're going to stay with your company, or they might churn as a result of a bad support. You can sell someone with all the bells and whistles, you can give them the best thing ever, but if it breaks and you can't fix it and you can't mend that part of the relationship, then what's the point, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna um, I want to throw something out there, because I talked a little bit about CSAT, and how the agent shouldn't be pinned for the overall IT experience, right? You shouldn't hold somebody accountable for something outside their control. Disney does something that in their survey, and I'm going to assume just about everybody who listens to your show has probably called the Disney Support Center at one point or another, right?
Yeah.
They do something in their survey, and I'm telling you, listen to their survey the next time you call, and then compare it to like when you call the cable company, or something like that. The last question in the Disney cast member survey is, if you were starting a business, how likely would you be to hire the last cast member you spoke with?
Yes, that was such a great question. I
Wow.
noticed that. Like, it was so effective. Say it one more time so we can really nail it in.
If you were starting a business, how likely would you be to hire the last cast member you spoke with? I mean, talk about saying, I don't care about if you're, I mean, in a sense, they're saying, I don't care about if the issue is fixed at this point. You've already answered those questions, because I think it's like the sixth question, and which is usually more questions than you get in a survey, and usually more than most customers will answer. But, you know, it basically, what it's saying is, all the other questions are throwaway at this point. Just tell me how you feel about that cast member. That's what I want to know. And that's how you measure people, right?
It's so effective because it takes something that is very abstract, like how was your experience generally, but then it puts a number to it that can be then reported on and collated like at the end of a quarter or something. So it's, the folks for that are listening that are like, listen, I don't know if it's enough worth our time and money to be investing and improving this department or whatever, because it's just so high cost, like you said earlier, because we don't know if it can be measured. It can be measured if you're looking at the right things to measure and you're positioning the proper questions in order to do that. And that example you provided, Doug, is just a perfect use case for that. Um, Give me another favorite like IT tech support moment that you've experienced customer service wise with Disney.
So, all right. I'm going to throw one out there because this was an anomaly, right? Um, and in 52 years, 51 years of going to Disney World now, I never had a cast member ever say the word no to me. And what's really interesting is it happened to me twice in one trip last year. The first was when I wanted to when I wanted to renew my annual pass, which had expired during the pandemic. And I get it, but I've never ever had a cast member say no, and that was the first instance. I went in and they were just like, no, our system doesn't allow it. One, don't ever blame the system, right? That's bad form. Don't ever blame the system and don't ever blame policy.
Tell me why. Educate me on this.
Yeah. So there's a there's an old saying that excuses are like something else that all of us have, right? And, and so the point is that you when you blame the system, what you're really saying is our technology is more important than you are, which is bad, right? And the same thing with policy. Don't ever blame policy because you're saying the same thing. Our policies are more important than you are. And so you're sending a message subliminally so, or in some cases very blatantly so. But what you're saying is you as a customer, you as a consumer of our service or our goods or whatever, you're just not that important right now. And what they should have done, and I actually revisited that issue on this last trip just to see how it would go this time. And they did a much better job. They said, unfortunately, this time we are not renewing passes. However, you can do this, right? And that's the way it should go. There should always be, and my wife does improv theater. And so I learned from my wife the yes and approach, right? So yes, we could do that. Unfortunately, this is not the time for that. And here's what we can do instead, right? So yes and find a way not to say no. But the other one actually was directly technology related, and that was the second no I got in this same trip, and it was very interesting. I happened to be walking through the Star Wars land through Batu, and in the middle of the walkway, right by Rise of the Resistance, they had set up a kiosk, and it wasn't one of the kiosks that's normally there. It was a different one. And what was very interesting is the cast member who was working the kiosk was obviously having some technology troubles because there was another cast member who was down on her knees and working underneath the POS and working on it. And as I'm walking by, like the cast member who was working the kiosk, like just starts freaking out, going, "No, no, you can't be back here. You can't be back here." And I'm like, one, I'm in the middle of the walkway, so I'm not sure what back here means,
You're
you
like, I
know?
am on the active human pathway. I am a
Yeah,
resident of
exactly.
Batu. Excuse me.
Right, exactly. But what's interesting is the cast member who was working, obviously in the IT department, working on the POS, actually got out from under the POS and said, "Sir, I'm sorry. He's had a rough day because the technology is not working right now, which is why I'm here to help fix it." Perfect. Saved it, right? So just two different ways that you can address very similar situations, one of which works perfectly and the other of which, sends the wrong signal.
Okay, I'm loving this right now. Give me an example of I'm going to give you like a scenario. All right. Let's say that I am selling some kind of AI new product. They're all everywhere. There's new founders of all these tech products out there. They're selling them as services, right? And I've paid a lot of money for this. I pay for it because I don't want to use Chat GPT. I want to make sure that it's working every time I log on and it's just not working. I go on and I'm angry and I'm sending a message to support. Hey, it's not working, but I don't hear anything. I don't hear back for like maybe 24 hours or I don't get a message. Like, tell me in that moment, what is the right next step that needs to happen? Angry customer goes on tech support. Hey, this thing's not working. I want my money back. What should be the proper next step to be able to deliver that positive experience within that conflicting moment?
Yeah, so those are always tough scenarios, and a lot of it depends on the size of your organization. I mean, because large organizations will have what they call customer success teams, which usually swoop in and, here I come to save the day, right? I mean, that's what they do, right? They come in when there's escalations and they take care of the escalations. But I'm actually going to, walk that back a couple of steps, and the right thing to do was long past. And that is, there was obviously a lack of alignment between the customer and the service provider. And that's what I find very interesting as I get deeper and deeper into some of these engagements, particularly when it comes to customer experience, is that the reason for those watermelon metrics where they looked great on the outside, they looked green, everything was perfect, and yet in the inside it's red because you guys suck. I mean I've literally heard service desk sucks, even though your metrics look great. Service desk sucks. I hear that repeatedly. It's not an uncommon refrain, right? Um, but the reason there's that dichotomy is because there's never been alignment in the first place. Usually those SLAs, and this is why I'm even hesitant to call them SLAs. SLAs are service level agreements, and by definition, a service level agreement is negotiated, agreed, and there's usually penalties and or bonuses for either for achievement or failure. Um, Most SLAs, when it comes to IT these days, are actually SLTs. They're service level targets. And that's because they're unilaterally imposed by the IT department. And they say, this is what we're pretty sure that the business would be happy with. Or, even worse, this is what we can deliver, whether they like it or not. Both bad answers. What you need to do is you need to get to the negotiating table, whether it's with a customer, external or internal, and say, what do you need? What's your expectation? And oh, by the way, expectations don't just stay the same forever. You think expectations didn't change dramatically between December of 2019 and June of 2020? They changed massively. So it's not what's in a contract, it's what people expect. And people are more and more savvy. Customers are more and more savvy. They're now accustomed to, a couple of years ago I said they were accustomed, they wanted to go to YouTube and find the answer. Now they want to go to TikTok. I mean,
Right.
they want the answer in 20 frickin' seconds. They don't want you to spend 30 minutes on the phone with them just to not fix the issue, right? And so expectations change rapidly, and we need to be able to align in the first place. So the answer to your question, the long answer to your question, is not what we do in that moment. It's what we should have done many moments before.
And the companies that will continue to have issues is putting band aid fixes on those moments after the fact and never looking back at the scope of work or what was promised in that agreement or what's being sold or promised during the sales process of that, and how many times are customer agents actually like reaching out of their way to check in and be like, hey, it's been a minute. I know you haven't talked to us in a while. We just want to see if everything's okay. Those little small things can have massive positive amounts of impact in the overall journey. And I think it doesn't have to be excessive. I mean, for me as a pass holder at Disney, I love getting like a random like pass holder perk email or something that's just like, hey, here's this thing. Like, you haven't been here in a while. Like, look at all this cool stuff that's happening. And it's like, it doesn't have to be a call, it doesn't have to be a personalized email. It's just an intentional touch point that makes that
Right.
person feel spoken to or acknowledged, right?
Yeah.
And I'm loving that you feel the same way, and I'm curious to know, like, from you educating folks on this, like, how many people are actually surprised by this, or like they're like, whoa, we never thought of that, like, in ratio to the maybe person that goes to Disney and understands like the one-to-one person relationship of that.
So an interesting thing that I find is, and okay, this part is not interesting. This is just a fact. Most people in IT are fairly analytical. They're not passionate individuals like me, right?
Right.
But most IT folks are not emotive the way that I am when I start talking about this stuff. In fact, they kind of look at me like I have lizards crawling out of my ears usually. Um, but the reality is that they get that they need to change. Um, the the I guess the struggle that's real right now when it comes to that change is, how do I measure it? Because analytical people love to measure everything. And then, like I said, you know, it, I go someplace and I pay more for it because I want more service. I want better. Give me better. Give me exceptional. That's what I'm happy to pay more, significantly more for exceptional. But one of the things that I find a challenge in our industry right now in IT is, how do we charge for that? Because right now, particularly in the recessionary environment we're in, most people are trying to pare down their IT budget. Well, again, good, fast, and cheap. You can pick two. I can give you exceptional as long as you're willing to wait for it on a small budget, right? But that may mean you sit on hold for 5 minutes. You're probably not going to be happy with that, right? And so, one of the things that I think we need to really look at in my industry is looking at things like tiered pricing and saying, hey, if you want platinum service, you want that Disney experience, this is what it costs you. If you want, Universal, here's what it's going to cost you. If you want Six Flags, hey, cheap. It's going to be cheap, but guess what? It's not going to be great. And I think that's one of the things that I think particularly in IT and IT operations, that is the struggle right now is how do we convey that? How do we measure it? Two, how do we price it? And then two, how do we convey it properly? Um, and I think that's probably the biggest challenge.
And even prior to that, two things that you said earlier are just as important too. The person, or the company or whoever running it, they need to be able to hear the magic, listen for those cues, those moments, those, either it's a customer or a trend or like market data that's showing, hey, like this is the way that business needs to be. This is how we need to innovate. These are the problems that we are having, and being able to bring those problems to market too requires that partner, that secondhand person that can help that person bring it to life. We have visionaries, we have integrators. They're both aligned together in order to be able to not just hear the magic, listen for those market cues and make those big risky jumps, but to be able to properly execute them together as a team so that there is ROI down the line. There is vision, there is something, a path that's laid out in order to execute it. And once you have those, you've chosen that path, you've found your partner for that path, you've gone down the winding roads of the journeys of kind of going through these problems like we've discussed together, and finding them and acknowledging them, then, we really start to realize that we are the magic, right?
Yep.
Tell me about this amazing slide here, Doug.
So I just kind of threw this in because ultimately that's what we want to do is we want to be the magic.
Right.
And I want to dovetail off something you just said, because you were talking about, both the vision and sort of building a business around it.
Yeah.
There's a reason why I really believe there's a reason why the Disney company is what it is, and that's because Roy and Walt together. Walt was the creative genius. Roy was the business focused, driven individual that monetized it.
Yes.
And if not for that shared vision, that partnership, I love the partner statue, but I almost wish the partner statue had Roy in it too.
I do too.
Because it took three partners, right? It really did. But yeah, I think we all just want to be part of that magic. That's really what ultimately leads to the successful outcomes, and that's what. Again, I didn't even touch on this, but I think one of the things that is changing in IT and what this CX piece is doing is it's changing from outputs to outcomes. Is we're focusing on what we actually want to deliver and what the customer wants us to deliver, as opposed to how much, how fast, how often.
And that's a dangerous metric when we are stopping when we are not stopping to listen on what the customer actually wants and then determining how we can effectively provide that, and we start just thinking about those short-term wins or those short-term quotas or what the pressure that's around us, and we don't have that visionary overhead to be like, all right guys, listen, we have to pause because this direction is not going to help us in the long term, is where I'm very concerned. And I actually, to wrap up here as well, I read an article about one of the founders or presidents of Nintendo, and he talked about in Japan how their headquarters are not letting anyone go in their tech department, not because it's affordable, but because it's going to cost them more money to retrain and bring new people in and have those folks deliver that same experience that these former, like, these current tenured employees have. And and Disney is not completely safe from this. I mean, even Disney has had layoffs. So for anyone listening, what you need to focus on for your business right now is a balance of where are we going, how are we going to get there, but also how will we deliver that experience that will help us make more money in the long term because we're retaining those customers and we're building off of them. Doug, I could talk to you for a very, very long time. I'm probably going to have you on for part 2, of course, because this was so fun. But for anyone who wants to connect with you and learn more about you, or maybe connect with you regarding a presentation or something, how can they reach out to you?
Easiest way to reach me is on LinkedIn. It's Doug Rabold, ITIL HDI. There's a couple of Doug Rabolds, believe it or not. It's not a very common name, but my son is the second one. And then there's actually a golf pro in South Carolina. How that happens, I don't know. Not part of my family, at least not that I'm aware of. But yeah, Doug Rabold, HDI, ITIL HDI on LinkedIn. Please feel free to hit me up. You can either follow me, or if you want to hit the connect button and say that you saw me on Rita's show, I'm happy to connect and would love to help you in whatever way I possibly can.
I really appreciate it, Doug. Thank you so much for being on today. And if anyone has ideas or comments, leave them below, and I will be happy to maybe do a follow-up episode based on maybe any of the sample of topics that we've kind of discussed today. So thank you so much for being on Bippity Boppity Business, and we hope you all have a great day. No one makes math. You've been listening to Bippity Boppity Business. Like what you hear so far? Leave us a review in Apple, or listen to us anywhere you prefer listening to your podcast. Until next time, have a magical day.